Welcome back into Exit 99 Sports. As always, I'm Caleb Deloach. He's Cody Hinkabine, but today we welcome on a very special guest, Coach Corey Brownsberger, assistant coach for Jackson basketball, along with being the head JV coach. Thank you for joining us today.
I really appreciate you guys having me. Anytime we can chop it up and talk basketball, it's a good thing. So I really appreciate your guys' coverage as always, and excited to be here.
Yeah, we get to interact with you, obviously, after every Jackson basketball game. We do the radio, Cody and I, and we get that post-game interview with you. So we got to talk a little bit of basketball in those settings, but, I'm excited to get into a little bit different conversation. We're trying to maybe have season wrap-ups here with different teams in our little local coverage area. So we can start with you guys. So it's an exciting time here.
Exactly.
And, I guess we can just jump right into it, and I'll just start out with you personally before we get into the season. Okay. First time being on the show. What's your personal past with sports in general, or this basketball specifically?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small rural town just southeast of Kansas City, Montrose. Really, the only thing it's known for is basketball. It's a Class 1 school. Graduated one of 12.
Wow.
So it looks great on a transcript when you say that you were fifth in your class,
Yep.
But then you add the 12. It's not great. But, no, I graduated from Montrose in 2008, and actually originally thought I would be on this side with you guys. Did high school sports play-by-play for football, basketball when I wasn't playing, baseball when I wasn't playing, and then at the end of my senior year, kind of wanted to stick around basketball a little bit more. So I went to the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg, majored in physical education, had a chance from 2009 to 2013 to be a student assistant with their men's program for Kim Anderson, who would later become the head coach at the University of Missouri and then go to Pitt State. So I got to do that for 4 years. We won 3 MIAA championships, 1 tournament title, played in 2 regionals. So really good basketball for the Division II level. Then from after graduation, looked at any spot in the state of Missouri that would give a 23, I guess I was 23 at the time, kid a chance to be a head coach. Found Leopold on the map.
All right.
And so drove about 6 hours to Leopold. Had an interview. Things went well. Ended up getting the job there. My first year would have been 14-15. I was there for 3 years. Got a chance to go to Meadow Heights. I was at Meadow Heights from 17-18 until the 21-22 season. Really good experience at those 2 spots. Learned a lot, especially at Leopold. We were really, really young, and I got to cut my teeth doing a lot of – I was K through 12 PE, athletic director, coached junior high and high school.
Busy slate.
Yes, very much so. The best thing that ever came from that, though, was the math teacher my first year at Leopold was a guy named Carlton Toma. Who Jackson folks will know quite well. He was a longtime math teacher, basketball coach at Leopold. And the best decision he ever made, and the best decision I ever made, he introduced me actually to my now wife.
Wow.
Who was a former student of his, who then the next year would replace him as math teacher at Leopold. So that's where my connection with the Tomas started. Again, after Leopold went to Meadow Heights, we won 2 Woodland tournament titles, the only 2 in school history. We had really good success there. And then end up at Jackson. This will be my 3rd year, ended in my 3rd year here. And again, coaching and just like a lot of things in life comes back to connection.
Right.
And just so happened that when the coaching change at Jackson was happening, I had to go get my eyes checked out by the good doctor, a.k.a. our head coach, Corey Toma. And through some discussions, was interested in me coming over as an assistant. I'd like to think that his father was probably in his ear at some point and talking about our experiences together. But ended up at Jackson for that magical Final Four run, being our first year. So, I've had an opportunity to be around a lot of good people, whether it be Coach Anderson, Coach Toma, Carlton Toma at Leopold was a good mentor to me. It's funny now, we talk about it. Dr. Keenan Kinder, who's one of the assistant superintendents at Jackson, was the superintendent at Leopold that hired me.
Oh, wow.
So
pretty crazy how
it's crazy
it all comes
how
together like that.
Life works. And I 11 years ago when I moved down here, I never thought I would still be in Southeast Missouri. I originally planned to go back closer to home, and then I met my wife, and we have 2 great kids. My daughter Kennedy is 6, almost 7, and my son Carter is 3, almost 4. And I mean, they're at every home game they can be at, and they're at practice, and it's been a great journey, and I'm really, really glad to be in Jackson.
Yeah, all because you, like you said, you were looking for anywhere to go, and you found Leopold, Missouri, of all places. So pretty crazy how you just show up there, and then one thing leads to another.
It really is crazy. I knew where Cape Girardeau was. Obviously had no idea where Leopold was, and it was a great 3 years. I had really, really good kids. We weren't great. We struggled a lot, and a lot of that was me learning on the fly. And I took a lot of those lessons with me to Meadow Heights, and we had a lot of success there for 5 years. And then, taking that success. I don't get the Meadow Heights job if not for my Leopold connections, and I don't get this job at Jackson if not for those Leopold and Meadow Heights connections. Right. So everything works out for a reason, and it's all about connections and being in the right spot at the right time.
Yeah,
and thank you, Leopold.
Yeah, shout out Leopold.
I appreciate it. Yes,
112 people there.
Hey, I'm telling you what, those people love basketball, and the great thing is now the last several years, the cool thing is they have had some success, and they've got a really good young group coming, and it's been fun to see them continue to mature. I know I've been doing this a long time now, when the kids that are in high school were my elementary PE kids. Wow. So it's been nice, and I still stay up to date with kids that I coached at Meadow Heights and kids that I coached at Leopold, and a kid Austin Booker that I coached. He was a senior my first year at Leopold. 6'5" kid, could shoot it. Tears his ACL 3 games into my only season coaching him. But as far as the connection part of it, last year we go to Lindbergh and play districts up there. Austin's out of St. Louis now, and Austin comes over to the game and watches our district games, and he sits there and talks with Carlton Toma and Dr. Kinder, and everything all rotates and in a connection. It's pretty special. It really is.
Yeah, and then you said you were head coach over at Meadow Heights. So what was that transition like, going from being the head coach of a smaller school to being an assistant coach of a much bigger school?
I was always interested to see how it would work, because of my 2 other stops, Leopold and Meadow Heights, I didn't really have a staff. I think in the 3 years I was at Leopold, I had an assistant 1 year. At Meadow Heights, I had an assistant every year, a guy that means a lot to me, Mitch Nanny, who was a girls basketball coach out there for a long time and helped me on the boys' side in my time there. He helped me out a lot, but I was always interested because I had ran every aspect of my programs, Leopold, Meadow Heights. So I was interested to see how it would be coming over, A, having a staff around us, B, taking a little bit of a backseat in terms of not being the end-all be-all of the program. Not every buck stops with me. But the thing with Corey is, from day one, he put a lot of trust in me, A, to run the junior varsity program, but B, what he allows me to do on the sidelines for varsity games. My wife will tell you, the first time I've ever sat down in a high school basketball game that I've coached was my first year at Jackson as the varsity assistant. But what he allows me to do with game planning, one of my main responsibilities is I take care of, with Corey, the scouting and what we're going to do, defensive matchups, continuing to match kids up during games is part of my big responsibility. But he's always allowed me a lot of ownership of the program, and I can't thank him enough for that, because he put, like I said, nobody is going to have as much – no one's going to care as much of this program as somebody that, A, played in it, had coached in it previously, and lives here in this community. And his program means a lot to Corey. It means a lot to me. So for him to entrust so much responsibility has been huge.
Yeah. And so this is year 3.
Correct.
At Jackson. Year 1, Final Four, like you said. Year 2, you guys got beat in the district championship to the eventual state champions and Cardinal Ritter. So coming into this year, what is that like? What's the process going from, the final buzzer on the season ends, and then you have whatever it is, 9 months basically to get ready for the next season? What does that process look like?
So, like, we obviously take a little bit of time off. We probably had 2 weeks after we lost to Seckman, where we kind of just got away and recharged a little bit, decompressed. But it's starting up soon. Like right now, we're in the middle of our exit interviews, so we try to meet with all of our players, give them a rundown of where we felt like they were at this season, some highs, some lows, some in-betweens, get their feedback on how they felt like their season went, where we want to go forward next year. If they're seniors, we talk about where they feel like our culture is, because that's something that's very important to us, and the culture that we've tried to create since we've taken over the last 3 years. So we'll have those meetings. We're in the middle of them right now. And then it starts that spring window where we can actually get on the floor a couple days a week, continue to build, do some skill development, hit the weight room. The weight room's been really important to us. I mean, you look at that Final 4-year team, we really did a good job of keeping everybody healthy. I felt like continuing to get stronger as the year went on. And I think the weight room was a big component of that. So we'll hit that. Once schools ends, then we go into our contact period for summer basketball. We get 20 contact days. We'll practice a lot of those days, but then we'll go to several shootouts. Like we go to Lindenwood every summer. We try to hit up one of the Rib City shootouts. Chad Allen at Dexter has ran those for years, and those are huge for us. We're going to try and go out to Rolla this summer.
Okay.
And do some – we try to take a trip in the summer where we can kind of get away, let the kids bond a little bit, kind of build some of that camaraderie together, and see some teams we wouldn't normally see. And then the last couple of summers we went up to Ladue and played in a shootout up there, and there's always really good competition. So we'll do that, and then before you know it, it'll be time for school. We have our preseason work, which is pretty similar to our spring work at the end of the season, a lot of skill development, trying to build on what we see as strong suits, what we see as maybe possibly weaknesses that we need to work on. And then we were right into to practice and gearing up for the grind of the high school basketball season.
Yeah. So going into the season, speaking of this past season, you guys lost a lot from the previous year. That's, as you just said, you guys had 6 seniors this year. It's kind of a theme, probably a good sign in a way, a healthy program, but still tough to go, all right, we're going to graduate a bunch of starters. Oh, and now we're going to graduate all of our starters again. So you had Cole coming back, who obviously had a great season the year before, his first year starting, 20 points. But everybody else in the new role that they were going to be taking on was totally unproven, new, like you said, everything around them. So what kind of were your thoughts, your impressions of the guys kind of molding together, coming together preseason wise?
Yeah, I thought obviously there was a lot of questions up in the air about this group, and I think it was natural for people to talk about how much we lost, and this was the first year, even though we lost a lot off that Final Four team, but we still had a really strong nucleus of kids that had played a lot, whether it be Blaine, Judd, Gavin Holdman, Braden Toma. So we had a good framework to work around. Right. I think this was the first of the 3 years where there were a lot of unknowns. We've kind of had a lineage of point guards since we've been here, whether it was Cade Winborn our first year to Braden Toma our second year. How Colton was going to step into that role was going to be big for us. So that was probably point number one. How would Cole do with the added leadership component of not only being our leading scorer, but now you don't have Blaine, you don't have Judd, you don't have Gavin. So the arrow was going to be pointed right at you from everybody's game plan.
Right. And all those guys, like you said, those are guys that they score 15 points in a game. It's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. You've never seen, Colton Toma. You've never seen Braden Thompson, Jory Toma even play on the varsity basketball court. You've never seen these guys produce anything. So had to be a little bit of like you said. There
was a lot of question marks. The good thing about it is I had seen, like we talked a little bit about it off the air, this group of seniors were sophomores my first year. So I'd coached them in game situations at the JV level every single night for an entire year. And you see guys like Colton, who knew Colton had the ability. He was just going to finally have a little bit of more of a chance to show it. Braden Thompson, we knew what Braden was going to bring us. Like, look, anybody that watched us play the last 2 years, Braden was not out there, and Braden knows this. He wasn't out there for his scoring. He was out there for his leadership, his vocal communication, rebounding, defense, toughness, and he brought that every single game.
Taking a charge in the first minute and a half of every game.
It was either a charge or an offensive foul, one of the two. And I love that kid to death for what he brought to our program. So we knew what we were going to get from that standpoint. How would he be able to add some offensive production to his game? Kid like Lee Ivey, who's we knew had a good skill set. How would that translate with more minutes? A kid, Austin Criddle, who I'm so proud of Austin because he was a kid as a junior, knew he wasn't going to get a lot of minutes on the varsity level, but when we asked him to come down and get some minutes on the JV as a junior, he handled that process so well and took what he needed to out of that, got game reps, got confidence, to you see hardly got any varsity minutes as a junior to he was in our bigs rotation, that four-man big rotation, played in every game, had key moments for us all year long, whether it was making a big shot, getting a rebound, defense, leadership. So from that senior group, that was kind of some of the question marks. And then you had kids, like you said, you have Jory Toma, who we had feelings we were going to need big things from him this year. Had only really seen it on the JV level as a freshman. A kid like Blaine Reagan, a kid like John Ernst, who, again, is coming straight from junior high basketball to now basically he started with us playing this summer varsity basketball with grown men, basically, how that was going to translate. So there was a lot of questions. I told Corey Toma before our season started, from a coaching standpoint, this year almost excited me more than the other two because there were so many unknowns about how we could piece and change things up. Yeah. So it was exciting. Obviously, a lot of questions, but I was looking forward to see how we were going to handle some of these challenges.
Right. So me and Caleb go to a lot of this stuff, but we're going to Thanksgiving weekend. We don't even really know what the team's going to be. At what point do you think, hey, this could be a 20-win team? Is that before the season, or did it take a few games in? I mean, we really our expectations weren't that high, I would say, Caleb.
I don't know if we ever sat down and said, man, I think we can win 20 games with this group. And I don't know that we really ever sat down with either one of the first two groups and said, I think we can get to 20 wins with these guys. Right. I think it was more so as the season continued to go, our expectations were always, and Coach Toma Corey does a great job with this, of our standard is up here. We want to get our standard in basketball the same way it is in football.
Right.
We expect to not only win district titles, but go compete for state titles. And we haven't changed that in any of the 3 years that we've been together. So that was what we talked about with the kids from the jump of look, you guys have a target on your back. We're Jackson basketball. But B, you're going to be looked at because of what we lost as an underdog. But our expectation doesn't change about what our standard is and about what we expect. So, again, there was a lot of unknown, but as the games continued to go, and we just kind of found ways to win. The first year, I think if you asked, like, what was our style, it was pressure you the entire length of the floor, run and jump you, play great defense, be able to throw it into Clayton. Blaine was going to hit big shots. I don't know that we had a set style this year. Mm-hmm. We kind of morphed based on what we thought was going to give us the best matchup and the best way to win the game.
Yeah. So getting into the season this past year, so early season, you guys go back-to-back with, I think, one game in between Crothersville. You go back-to-back tournaments. Mm-hmm. You start out at Borgia, 3 seed coming into that. Last year, I think you guys got 4th in that tournament.
Correct. Yeah, we were the 1 seed last year and got 4th, yep.
Yeah, so then, what do you think going into that tournament? Obviously, it had Principia again, who I will say I didn't know that they were going to be unbelievable like they were this year. Like last year, they were very, very good. But what did you think going into that tournament? And then, you guys went 2-1, lost in the championship game there to a team that went 30-1. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that takeaway from that tournament alone?
Going into it, we knew there was going to be really good competition. We knew Principia. Look, those kids were all freshmen, sophomores the year before, and they had all gotten better. Jay Blossom is a Missouri Hall of Famer for a reason. We knew they were going to be ready to roll, but we knew we were going to get 3 really good games. I guess the biggest thing coming into that was we had just gotten Jory, Blaine, Gavin Allspall, these kids from football. So, in prepping for this, I went back and watched some of the Borgia tournament. Our first game against Owensville, Jory, who ends up being our second leading scorer, is probably the third guard that comes off the bench in that game, just because we didn't know a lot. He hadn't had a lot of reps at that point. So I was more so, I knew by the time those 3 games were done, we would have a better idea of where kids slotted into our rotation. We would have a better idea of maybe some sets we could go to, of what groupings played well or better together than others. And so I was anxious and excited to see where that was going to go.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, game 1, you beat Owensville at the buzzer by 2. It kind of felt like, even though you won that game, then you blew out in Confluence. But there was a lot of Owensville finishes throughout this year of you guys having to play tight games and actually show up there down the stretch. Felt like a common theme. And then leading into the SEMO Conference tournament, that was every single game you played there.
Yeah, and going back to the Owensville game, I think at the time people looked at it. Obviously, it wasn't a loss, but wow, okay, we beat Owensville by 2. They ended up winning a district. Right. They ended up playing in the state playoffs. Colin Van Leer, who is their head coach, and again, everything's connection. Colin played at Mizzou for Kim Anderson, so I've known Colin for a few years, but they run such a unique system for the way basketball is played today. Everything is an off-ball cut. I would compare it to, on the football side, of everybody runs the spread now. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden you run into Farmington, who was up until next year was triple option.
Right.
And it's hard to prep for that. Well, we had to prep for all these cuts, all these different off-ball screens game one.
And they had played a game already.
They had played a game already. They returned basically everybody from their team the year prior. So did I think we played extremely well in that game? No. But the fact that, again, we figured it out and found a way to win gave me some good feelings going forward. And then, the Confluence game, they had looked like world beaters against Union in game one, and we came out and I thought played really, really well early. Cole hit shots. The biggest surprise from that game is I think out of our first 11 points, I think Braden Thompson had 9.
Yeah, he went off, I think. Yeah, he had 9.
He had an and one to start the game, so that was a good moment for us. But then, you go to the Principia game, and we played them, especially early, as well as anybody did all year long. And then, we ran out of gas in the fourth quarter, and the wheels kind of came off a little bit. But overall, taking away, 2-1 out of that tournament, and then, again, we go to Caruthersville, which is always interesting. And they're, again, Lamont Bell, really good coach. They have some stud athletes. And again, very similar to a lot of our games, especially early. Don't know that we played exceptionally well throughout the game, but at the end of it, we figured it out and found ways to make plays on the road and got a W.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you go straight into SEMO Conference.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the margin of victory still, once again. Mm-hmm. New Madrid 4, Cape 7, Notre Dame 7. A little bit of a theme you guys had there.
Yeah, and the thing with, and again, I was replaying the season, especially early. I think the book on us was try to speed us up offensively, and then slow it down when the other team had the basketball. So you look at the New Madrid game; they were in us full court, kind of trap, try to take us out of stuff, boxing one Cole. Try to muck the game up, and then offensively, they were slow and methodical and shrunk possessions. And then at the end of the day, I don't remember what our free throw percentage was. It was not great. And kept that game much, much tighter. But again, at the end of the day, to throw all the statistics out, we got a big stop when we needed to in the last possession and found a way to win that game. You go to Cape. Again, Lamont does a great job, has forever. Lamont Frazier, Charleston legend. He's been in a couple different other spots, but they were really well coached, and again, at the time had their full roster, and they were a bad matchup for us, at least at that junction of the basketball season, because we hadn't had a lot of time to really get into the nuts and bolts of it. So we learned some lessons there, and I was so proud of our effort against Notre Dame, of how we responded. We talked about Austin Criddle earlier. He didn't score a point in that game.
That was the Austin Criddle game. Like you said, didn't score a point, but yeah.
But rebounding, his defense on Dohan was great, how he moved the basketball. And then kids like, Colton Toma hit some big shots early that game. Jory hits a big 3 late. And again, coming out of there with a third place plaque in the SEMO Conference with how good this conference is nothing to sneeze at. So again, at that point of the season, I was really proud with where we were at. Still had a lot of questions, but we were starting to get some answers, I think, of where kids slotted in and the potential of this group.
Right. Yeah, I didn't. You said you had 2 games between there and Christmas. You guys went to Dexter, got another win against another well-coached team. Obviously,
Yes.
Chad Allen, always great. And then turn around Festus. There was everything was going your guys' way in that Festus game. It felt like shots were falling, their shots were not falling. The Johnson kid had a terrible game, especially early. That little run or that little just 2-game stretch, and then beating Notre Dame in that 2-game stretch, felt like it had good momentum going into Christmas break there.
Yeah, the Dexter game again. Chad's always going to give his kids a chance to be competitive and win the game because of how good of a coach he is. And I thought we did a pretty good job of learning some lessons because they wanted to do what other teams had done. They wanted to run their zone and pressure us a little bit and then be really methodical with their dribble weave. Right. And I thought we did a good job of stretching that lead out and making enough plays to where that wasn't a close game late. Then you go to the Festus game again. That was our first home game, if I remember correctly, which was crazy. But that was the most locked in that group had been in a scout and a game prep up to that point that I had seen. And yeah, the Johnson kid was averaging 18, 19 a game at the time, and then he met Blaine Reagan and Jory Toma. Yep. And everything he took was a difficult shot. We were getting out in transition. Good things happened, and it kind of snowballed. But that was up to that point. I think that was by far the most complete basketball game we had played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then we get to the Christmas tournament. You come into that as Caleb refers to as the evil empire, the big dog, the other side of the coin. Talk us through kind of how that goes against the Oak Ridge and then eventually a Scott City, who a lot of people were pulling for the underdog in that one, let's say.
Oh, yeah. And, the thing going into it is Coach Toma and I talked. I think going into the seed meeting, I think a lot of people felt like Cape would probably get the one. Mm-hmm. They had beaten us, but with them losing, the seed meeting happened, I guess, prior to them beating, prior to them beating us the first time. But they had lost. I think it was on a Saturday. They lost on a Saturday at DeSoto at their tournament. And I think that kind of gave us the leg up. So we get the 1 seed. And then, we go into Chaffee. And, again, it was a perfect storm of them controlling tempo. I felt like we pressed a little bit when they started to hit some shots, maybe doing some things that were uncharacteristic for us. We tried to speed them up. And with this personnel group that we had, that was never going to be our bread and butter. And so we got out of character a little bit there, and they made that game much closer. And it's, been doing this long enough. Josh Govero, who's coached Chaffee forever, does a really good job. He was going to keep his kids in any game he could because of how good of a coach he is.
And they have some pretty good individual talent.
They do. The younger Fowler kid, Nolan, I believe his name is a really talented player. Reichman was really strong on the block for an undersized post player, and they had some kids that could flat out shoot it, and they made a lot of shots and kept that game close. And our kids are growing up in this social media age where even in high school basketball, we come out of that Chaffee game, and I think everybody but people in our locker room were expecting Scott City to beat us that next game, and they knew that. And a certain assistant coach may have mentioned that a few times in prep up to that point. And, I think the biggest thing that stands out from that game is at the end of the first half, we kind of we're playing fairly well, but we kind of have a couple possession blunder. And the one thing I remember is I challenged John at halftime to kind of step up. And, he's a 14-year-old kid that's a freshman in high school. Yeah. And he did. He made some big plays down the stretch. Cole was really good. Lee was pretty good in that game as well. And Thompson being Thompson, Colton handles the basketball. But we made some plays, played well in the second half and stretched it out. And, we take care of Scott City. And going into Cape, our game plan, we had seen them on film now. We had played them. And Coach Toma was one of the best at making adjustments game to game and in game. And so our plan going into that game was we felt like, even though I think Tyshandre got most of the pub from his scoring ability, Mateo Rivers was the head of the snake. He got them into everything. He was their leader. So we're going to change how we were going to guard him, rotating Blaine and Jory as much as we could. We were going to switch up defenses more to try to stagnate them as much as we could. And then at the end of the day, we had a lot of kids step up. Cole didn't get going early in that game. He missed a couple shots but he didn't press. He didn't force. John was big early. But we had so many kids in that game. I mean, Blaine Reagan made plays. Lee Ivy made plays throughout that game. What a lot of people don't know is Colton was sick as a dog that entire game and gutted it out and played and handled the basketball. I don't know that he turned it over much. But Jory, I think that was probably Jory's coming out party.
Right.
With the plays that he made at the times that he made them. I mean, the steal to seal it that just gave me chills thinking about that because I can still see him tipping that. I mean, that was one of the more athletic plays I've seen a kid make, of tipping that and tipping it forward. But, I said it to Corey and I said it to Rob Johnson, one of our assistants, is after the game, first time we had won Christmas tournament, I believe, since 13-14. Right. Not bad for what everybody expected to be a rebuilding or down year for us. So, again, I think our group had a chip on their shoulder at that point that people were talking about, Scott City, who was a very capable team, beating us and being the favorite, and we're going to get blown out by Cape. We had seen them the last 2 years in the Christmas tournament, and I think our kids took that personal.
You guys were on a bad stretch there where you had lost two straight championships. Yeah, two straight championships. Didn't want to make a third.
No, and again, I think our kids took that personally. I know I did, just from any little thing that you can give us a little bit of an edge, and I think that did. Not that we needed much more, but that was a special night for us.
Seems like each year you kind of mold into the defensive mindset. Mm-hmm. Scott City, we know now, average 74 points a game. You hold them to 47, hold Cape Central to 41. You're in the midst of what would go on to be an 11-game win streak. You had won 7 straight at the time, but carry that momentum over into the new year. We knew Farmington, very good team. Get them at home this year.
Yeah, and the funny thing is talking to their head coach after the game, Coach Callahan, is, the year before they were still a little young, kind of trying to find their way a little bit, and we go to Farmington and lose in double overtime. Right. Probably a game that we felt like we should have won, and they felt like they kind of got out of there with a surprising result.
He didn't call timeout there.
That still hurts. But then we go to this game, and I think they were undefeated at the time, and we talk about all the time. 2 years ago, Ladue comes in undefeated. It's not very often you get somebody that late in the season undefeated coming to your place, and our kids, I thought, were going to be ready for the challenge of that in a game that they were favored in. I mean, if there were betting odds on a high school game, they would have been favored, and probably fairly heavily at that point. But the funny thing is, we did not start that game off well at all. We were kind of in a daze. It was a little sluggish, and to his dying credit, Coach Toma will never take credit for any of our success, but he's the one that got us out of that. He called the timeout and got everybody woke up, myself included, and from then we came and competed and got stops and made things difficult for Roth and Shopper Kid, who both ended up scoring 1,000 points in their high school career, but we made their life as difficult as we could. And then again, we hit shots. And it was a huge victory for us because I felt like that kind of catapulted us into, okay, you beat Scott City, you beat Cape. Farmington at the time and ended up in the season being one of the best teams in our area.
Yeah, I think they were coming off wins over Cape and Sykeston. Really, so.
And they handled Cape in their game. And, I think people were kind of looking around going, okay, let's see what they do against Farmington. And the fact that we were able to win that game, I think, got us a little bit, of some recognition and kind of continued our ascension to where people in the area were talking about, wow, this is another good Jackson team.
Right. Yeah, and then, you had back-to-back road games back on the road again. You guys were a lot. You go to Kennett. Tough game against Kennett. Dyson Watson can score the ball.
Yes.
Made life very difficult for you guys. And also at Hillsboro, we talk about another individual person, Greg Robinson, also makes life very difficult. Got to the line a lot. I didn't complain about it one time on the air. Trust me.
I think he's still at the free throw line shooting if we were taking bets here. But no, we go to Kennett, and Dyson is a very, very talented offensive player. And, he was our game plan going in, just like they were game planning against Cole. And I think that some of that frustrated us and Cole at times. And again, we talked earlier, Cape maybe was Jory's coming out party. If Cape wasn't, Kennett surely was, because I think he had 18.
Yeah, 18, I think. Yep.
Yeah, and a huge three in semi-transition to kind of seal that one. He had some courage, we'll say, because it was in semi-transition.
It was a no, yes.
Yes. But no, the kid doesn't know anything other than playing hard and going after it every possession. And so, that was a big win. Cause again, we go back and we look at all these different games that we were close in, we're 21-7, and Kennett was a game we could have lost. Chaffee was a game we could have lost. Cape was a game we could have lost at the Christmas tournament. Owensville was a game we could have lost. So you just keep going on down the line, and our kids figure it out. They figured out how to win. You go to Hillsboro. We're up early. They come back. They're up. There's stretches of the third quarter where it looks like it might start to go to their favor a little bit. And again, we figure it out. We figure out how to keep our composure and make plays to win basketball games at the end. So that was kind of the theme for the season. Just find a way.
I want to say 23 free throws by Greg Robinson.
Every bit of it.
It's like 11 for 23.
Yeah, he did not shoot a high percentage, which is why we won that game.
They had kids making threes that were shooting like 12%. I was going nuts.
Trust me, from the guy that was putting the scouting report together, I'm like, this kid's hitting a three. Yeah, that was a lot of fun for me.
But yeah, I mean, we can just jump straight into then kind of the big one. You guys drop one to Cape Central 48-42. Obviously a very big game in all of Southeast Missouri, but especially right here in Cape County, especially in a year like this where you guys are both having good seasons.
Yeah, and that just like all really well-coached teams, we adjusted after the first game to our second game. They adjusted from game 2 to game 3. I think what gave them problems in the second game was our constant switching defenses. They threw in some wrinkles offensively in that third game versus our zone that we don't play a lot of. And then at the end of the day, Mateo played a lot better in the third game than he did in the second game, and we weren't as successful on Mateo. And I think that led to one of the biggest reasons why they ended up beating us. We turned it over too much. They had some different guys that they could throw on Cole, whether it be Tyshandre, Mateo, Antonio Sims, Goliath. It didn't really matter, but they could always change up how they were guarding Cole, whether it be Sims and Teo with their quickness or Goliath and Tyshandre with their strength. I think that frustrated us, and at the end of the day, that was why they were better than us on that day. And I feel like we were able to take kind of a look in the mirror and figure some things out after that.
You continue on with the conference. You have a home game, Notre Dame. We'll call it a free throw shooting contest maybe, but you end up pulling away there at the end.
Yeah, we say this about Cape, Notre Dame, Sykeston. It doesn't matter. In the SEMO conference, all these kids played against each other forever, and Notre Dame especially. There's a healthy rivalry, we'll say, there. I knew that game was going to be intense from the jump just because, again, it didn't matter whether it was junior high or not junior high, but freshman, JV to now. Every time we played that group, it's always been tightly contested. Jeremy Brinkmeyer is going to do a really good job with his group, and we knew that they felt like they should have played better the first time. And, again, you want to talk about being locked in on a scout. We knew their stuff. Our guys knew their stuff. We blew up a lot of what they were trying to do, which obviously folks know it's going to Dohan or Colton Johnson. And I felt like we made life difficult for them offensively. I think our physicality was really, really good, and we kept our composure. And at the end of the day, that's why we came away with that win.
Yeah, I mean, that was, like you said, well, also, one emotional game to another emotional game, Cape then Notre Dame. But the defensive side of that was impressive because I want to say there was like 4 combined field goals made between Johnson and Dohan in that game. I think Dohan he's both teams shot like 75 free throws. But he finished with probably about 10. But I think he only made 1 shot in that game. It was something Cody and I kept talking about. This kid averages 20 a game. Like he's probably never been held to 1 field goal in his life. So
yeah, and the thing that we always try to do defensively, like most people, is take away what a kid wants to do and make him do something else. I think Colton Johnson is one of the best pure shooters in this area, and we tried to make him put the ball on the floor as much as we could and make him take tough twos. And I think when he scored in the game, I think he was taking tough twos. And again, you're not going to hold a kid like that down the entire game, or Dohan. So just trying to make them do something outside of what their first option is was probably the agenda there. And our kids, again, Jory and Blaine on Colton, and then you look at Thompson, Criddle, Lee, John, whoever on Dohan. I think we frustrated them, and it was really rewarding to see how locked in our kids were on the scout and what we wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, overall, this is a rough stretch. You have Cape, Notre Dame, and then the next game, obviously, at Ladue, Charleston, Webster Groves, New Madrid, Sykes, and Seckman, Lutheran, St. Charles. Crazy way to end the season as far as just difficulty goes. But, yeah, I mean, on the road immediately after, back-to-back in-county games, we had to go play the number, 3 team in Class 5, whatever it was. There was no nights off.
And here's the thing, and every time we go into a district seed meeting or there's state rankings, which don't mean anything or whatever, everybody always talks about the schools, the St. Louis schools, the schedules that they play. And I get it. They play a really, really tough schedule, in-state, out-of-state, whatever. There are no nights off in this area. I don't care what class it is. Look, Scott City is a Class 3 school. They're one of the best teams in this area. You can put them against anybody. Coach Danny Mueller and his staff, you take those kids, they are going to beat a lot of people, and they did this year, obviously. So there were no nights off on our schedule, and we knew that. And then, obviously you go to Ladue, and we knew they were going to be ready for us because, again, we were the one of 2 teams that had beaten them last year. We ended their undefeated streak, and I thought that our guys from the jump against a really good opponent never lost sight of what we were trying to do, especially offensively, because they want to run around and trap and speed the game up. And I thought we executed pretty well in that game, hit some shots. I thought John played extremely well at times. The spin movie, I talked about it today in our meeting with him. The spin movie he had on Hayden Arnold on the baseline was one of the prettiest basketball plays that I saw this year. and shows how talented he is and has the capability of being. But, Jory, again, hit big shots late. Cole was Cole and hit shots throughout. I thought Lee and those kids made plays at times. Colton did a really, really good job of getting us into offense. That's the thing. Colton, I think he averaged probably 6 points a game, something this year. But his assist-to-turnover ratio was great. He never felt like he got sped up in any game we played. And I thought he did a great job of leading our group without saying a whole lot this year, of being that point guard who very rarely came out of the game. And his contributions were much more than what he gave us statistically. So that Ladue game was huge, I thought, for our confidence.
Yeah, I mean, you go from Ladue, which I also just want to say that was a workout for me, watching that Ladue game go up and down, especially after a bunch of the 40 and 50-point games I'd been watching for about 2 months. Mm-hmm. That was the most impressive takeaway from that, was you guys were scoring. You guys could score with a team that we're going to run up and down. We're going to just take a bunch of transition threes. We're going to drive and kick a million times.
And I think that was one of the reasons why, the funny thing, I was looking at the stats today. This group actually by about 0.3% or 0.3 points a game outscored the Final Four team. I think we averaged 58.3, and the Final Four team.
You were also addicted to scoring 30 points a game. And
correct. Hey, but at the end of the day, you give me, I'll score 20 points if I get to the Final Four again. But why we're talking about that Final Four team. We went to the Final Four scoring. I don't think we hit 40 points until the semifinal game when we got Staley.
Yeah.
But I digress. Defense travels. That's the moral of that story. But no, the thing with Ladue, I think the reason we scored more was simply because that was the first game in a while where teams weren't trying to shrink possessions on us because of how Ladue plays. Right. And so we showed that we could score when there were so many more possessions like a game with Ladue is going to give you. And so I was proud of our guys for how they adapted to that. But I think that goes back to what the theme of this group was, their adaptability of being able to play a bunch of different styles and just kind of figuring it out and figuring out what gave us the best chance to win games.
Yeah, I mean, so you go from – it was a high-scoring stretch there. You go from Ladue, come back home, senior night, Charleston goes to overtime. A lot of things to take away from that, but
yes,
you guys did win, and also Cole scored 40.
He had 42.
42.
Yeah,
insane number.
Yeah,
I said I don't know the historical stats. That's the most I remember since I was in high school. So
yeah, I've talked to some guys. Obviously, Corey played here. That's the only I don't know who else would have topped that. I mean, I'm sure back in the day when Corey was playing, Mark Keeney probably put up some big numbers.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure Blake Reynolds.
I think his high was 40.
So
that was the one I looked at. I knew I could find that online.
Yeah,
and I remember him. He just killed people. But yeah, he had 40. I knew. So I saw when Cole.
You're saying
42.
The guy that went to Yale was pretty good at basketball.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
Yeah, that was my indoctrination.
Ask him where he learned everything.
Okay,
like this guy right here, this guy.
Hey, that was my indoctrination into Southeast Missouri basketball. My first year in Southeast Missouri, coaching at Leopold, I went to the Christmas tournament, to the championship night, and it's Jackson, Notre Dame, Blake Reynolds in that group versus Quinn Poitras and Notre Dame. And I'm
like, does every team have 6'8" guys that are shooting 40% from three?
I'm sitting here looking around going, where is this kid? But yeah, Cole obviously he's the most gifted offensive player I've ever coached. He could score at three levels, take you off the bounce, shoot the three, he could post you up at times, he could finish at the rim. And you saw at times this year, Charleston 42. I know we're going to talk about the Webster Groves game, the game they had against that crew.
Yeah, it was a tear there where Cape Central, he was held to 9, which is the lowest of the season. I think the lowest of the last 2 seasons.
Correct, yeah.
So it felt like after that game, I mean, obviously he's just capable of scoring 20 plus every single game. But he did. I'm pretty sure from that stretch there, he had 20 every game until the end of the season.
Yeah, and you know, he did a really good job for the most part this year of when, especially early when we needed him to, when kids were still feeling their way out, of taking the onus of the offense, but still getting his teammates involved, and he did get other kids buckets. But yeah, I mean, 42 against Charleston, that was special. And the thing I'll remember about that game is, you know, Deshaun Henderson's kind of having his way at the time, and
all-time mismatch guy.
Yeah, just, you know, and it wasn't from lack of. I mean, Thompson was trying, Lee was trying, everybody we were throwing at him was trying. Cole kind of took some onus there and wanted to guard him, and he was probably the one that frustrated Deshaun the most late in that game. And again, different kids stepped up, and Cole obviously had a great night. And the thing that can't get lost here is it's not like the year before when Cole would have big games and people probably put more of their onus on Blaine or Judd or whoever. Everybody was going to try and stop him.
Right.
And Charleston was no different. So then you go figure out a way to win that game. Then we get Webster Groves at home. Scotty Atkinson, who ends up becoming the Gatorade Player of the Year. So that's 3 years in a row.
Scotty Atkinson, he's incredible. Like, what was that like preparing for him?
So I you know, most of coaching, whether it's scouting, offensive sets, defensive strategy, is really all about stealing stuff from different people. And I got to give credit to a guy that I coached against. He was at Eminence at the time, and I was at Leopold. His name's Pete McBride. And Pete is now at Branson. Well, they had played Webster Groves in a tournament in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And I had reached out to Pete about getting film, and we got film and kind of got some notes from them and added that to some of the different stuff that we were going to try and do. But again, at the end of the day, we were going to try and make life as hard on him as possible. I think Jory and Blaine battled. You know, the kid had 30 that night, and he worked for all 30 that he got. And he made a lot of tough contested shots. And then I thought we did a pretty good job on their surrounding cast, the supporting cast. You know, I think Whitehead was probably in double figures that game, but some other kids like Shoe Pelts.
See, the Whitehead kid felt like the only kid that we really had trouble with outside of him. Because like you said, the Shoe Pelts kid, who I just watched make 1,000 threes at Sykeston, and then the Simpson kid is going to be another person who goes to Mizzou or wherever he wants in a few years. So.
You know, I don't know this for a fact, but that was one of John's better games, I think, down the stretch. And again, kids talk, kids look at social media. I think if most people were asked, I think they probably, going into that game, thought Miles Simpson was better than John was. Well, they're both freshmen.
Right.
And I think John stepped up to the challenge big time that game, as he did down the stretch. So, look, at the end of the day, that game sticks in my mind and my crawl more than I think about any of them do late, just because we had a team that won a state title on the ropes and should have beat them. But at the end of the day, you know, Scotty made a really tough shot, and you know, they were one more play better than we were that day. But
that was the hardest loss for me too. If it makes you feel any better, I was a part of a lot of devastating losses to Webster Groves in my lifetime, most of which were getting killed by Webster Groves. It was a lot of like 30-point losses, but then we had the same thing. It was like, this is a year we're good, we can beat this team, and we lose by like two to a kid from going to San Diego or something to scores at the last second. I just want one against Webster Groves. Look, we got to get the Webster Groves monkey off our back, Coach.
I really hope we can, because you know.
It's not going to get any easier.
No, it is not. Just ho-hum. They bring back the Gatorade Player of the Year, who will be a junior, and they bring back Kidden Simpson, that'll be a sophomore. But that game was one of the best high school basketball games from an atmosphere standpoint, from a quality of play standpoint that I've ever been a part of. And I mean, I talked to several people that night. You know, we had our trivia night the next night after that game, and everybody was still talking about it. Yeah. And it's just, obviously it hurts in the moment that we lost, but it's one of those that you sit back and look at and go, you know, that's pretty special to be a part of that. And yeah, it was very, very fun. But going back to Scotty, that's the third Gatorade Player of the Year from the state of Missouri that we played against in the 3 years we've been. Scotty, Jadis, and Kyan Evans from Staley, who is now the starting point guard for Colorado State. So he's okay.
He's all right.
Yeah.
You've played a couple of decent
He
players.
might be going to Minnesota because apparently
That's a good point.
Went to Minnesota. So who knows?
Yeah. You're gonna have a good resume of people to look back at one day. Here. Just in this little stretch, you're gonna be like, oh, hey, you're gonna be like, tell your kids, you're like, oh, look, that guy in the NBA is. They're like, you didn't, coach. Yes, I did.
Yes.
I had to game prep for him.
Yes, I did. I
did a great job. He only scored 30.
Hey, held him under his average. Here we go.
But yeah, so I mean that once again, your season did not get any easier going down the stretch because a week later. You're on the road in the field house at Sykeston on their senior night against, I mean, I know Webster Groves beat them, and Webster Groves is probably more talented NCAA player-wise. But Sykeston's one of those teams when they're at home and things are going their way and there's people barking at you. It's a storm that, like, you cannot stop, it feels like.
Yeah, and, you know, that's what happened that night. At the end of the day, I think both groups, I know our group and their group knew how big of a game that was. It was for a conference regular season title. Anytime we play Sykeston, it's going to be a big game. You know, 2 years ago, we go down on their senior night, and I think we beat them 20-something. But all those kids that are seniors now were sophomores on that team. And, you know, it kind of snowballed on us that night. We hit some shots, but then, you know, their pressure led to some easy buckets. Then they were confident. You know, Trace had a really good game. PJ was really good. Tristan, LeCarrion, Chris Artis. Like, I mean, you just go down the list. It was one of those games where it snowballed and it kind of got away from us. But the thing that I was proud of, and I think you could say that about every game we were playing this year and in the last 3 years, is our group never gave up. You know, that thing could have got to 30 if we would have laid down. And we kept battling, and, you know, John and Jory, Cole, Colton, everybody, we kept battling, kept staying in it. And, you know, I wish we could figure out exactly why. I just think at the end of the day, they brought a level of intensity that we didn't meet that night, and that was, you know, it's things we learn from going forward.
Then, you know, a couple weeks or, you know, a month later or two, you saw them and Webster Groves match up. Just quickly, what did you think about those two teams playing against each other? What you thought that would be like? Did it live up to your expectations?
Yeah. You know, I didn't know who was going to win the thing. Obviously, Coach Hollifield is a legend. Justin Mathis is a great coach at Webster Groves. You know, they always say you don't want to be the guy that replaces the legend. He is the guy that replaced the legend.
But 2 rings in like 5 years, not too bad.
Correct. And so obviously both really well coached. You would think at Sykeston you kind of lean towards Sykeston there, but the way Shoe Peltz came out and I mean, in the scouting report, the kid is a really good knockdown shooter. He's going, for those of you who don't know, he's going to Grinnell, which is a really good D3 program. It's got several years ago, the kid who holds the record for most points in a game plays in that up-tempo style. They continually rotate kids in. So he'll fit in well there. But, you know, the fact that Shoe Peltz went off like he did, I think is probably something that they weren't expecting. Yep. And obviously Scotty is Scotty. And at the end of the day, they probably did some uncharacteristic things in Sykeston and turning the ball over like they did. But either team that came out of that was going to have a really good shot at win a state title.
That felt like the state championship.
Yeah, it really did. And that's the sad thing about kind of how things are done in the state about, you look at some of the smaller classes, like in, I think it was Class 2, Hartville was the number 3 team in the state. They played the number 2 team in the state in the district title game, and then had to play Eugene in the sectional game, who was number 1. Right. All 3 of those teams could have been at the Final Four.
Yeah, I thought the same thing about Class 1 too, where Risco and Chadwick I thought are by far the best teams. In Class 1,
and it's sad that that's how it is. But
right. Me and Cody like to complain too.
Hey, look, I'm sure we could figure out a lot of the world's problems at this table, but yes. No, again. I think that whoever won the Sykeston Webster Groves game was going to have a legit shot to win a state title, as it proved out. So,
yeah, but back to you guys. Maybe it was the more frustrating losses. Last home game of the season, drop 1 to Seckman, which I knew they were going to come into the gate like they're having the best season ever in their school's history. A very young school, for those that don't know, only around since I think the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. And, up until like 2 years ago, they had never had a winning record in a single season. So something was going, things have been going the right direction for them. Obviously, they put together a great football program the last few years too. So I knew this was going to be a game that was really, really important for them, and it was going to be important for district seeding, stuff like that. What's just kind of what happened in that game? Where did things go wrong for you guys?
So, it's funny because it's towards the end of the year, and obviously this is around the time we got all that snow. So the Seckman game was originally supposed to be prior to the Sykeston game.
Yeah.
And, obviously some things with snow switched that around. And I think to a certain degree there was probably still some Sykeston hangover. But they also presented a lot of tough matchups for us because we play, for the most part, we play 2 traditional bigs and 3 guards, and they were mainly 5 guards out on the floor for the most part. And our transition D wasn't very good that night, and they got some easy stuff early. And then it led to them knocking down tough shots later because they were confident. So, that one, again, snowballed on us and got away. And we had a gut check after that game of, look, if we want to make a run, we have to fix some things. And our kids, after some good self-reflection, we'll call it, I thought we really stepped up to the plate down the stretch, whether it be Lutheran, Oakville, or then Seckman again, obviously.
Yeah. So. And you guys did bounce back, and you beat Lutheran St. Charles up there. Long road trip.
Yes.
Early start.
Yes.
I'm always concerned about those things, like throwing, because 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, whatever, they don't do well with like things changing on them from like what you expect it to be. So I'm always worried about those early start times and long trips. But you win that game. That's 20 wins, all in the regular season. Not something to, not be proud of for sure. I mean, that's big time. That's 2 20-win seasons in 3 years. That was something that hadn't been done for nearly a decade at that point too. So. It's a good regular season, good way to close it out there.
100%. And record be what it was. I think they were under 500, maybe won 8-9 games, but they have 2 really talented players in Stephanie and Woods, Tyler Stephanie and Jalen Woods. And we had a gut check after the Seckman game, and I thought our guys were really locked in that game. I thought that they carried out the game plan really, really well. We made stuff tough. We made things tough for them, especially early offensively. And then, again, we moved the basketball. Cole was really good, both defensively and offensively. Jory was really good late in that game. He had a really bad, either it was a leg bruise, contusion, what it was. but he came back in hobbling to the bench and proceeds to, as soon as we put him into the game, hit a three, get an and one. I think he gets a steal in another bucket. So that, like, Jory Toma is one of my all-time favorite kids coach. Like, the dude has no off switch. He doesn't know any better other than to play hard and get after it. And he showed that game and at different points this time of why he is going to be a really good player going forward.
So we talked about districts. We talked about after that game the district seed meeting, kind of where you thought you might shake out. Start times end up probably being an Achilles heel there, but how do those conversations go?
No, so again with Coach Toma's work schedule being what it is, and the fact that I've been a head coach before, he allows me to take on more responsibility. So I had a chance to sit in on the Zoom meeting for districts. And the way they set it up this year and the way it goes every year is, they open it up to whoever wants to host. You vote on it. And it came down to, I believe, Ritter and SLU were the two that were going to host. And SLU made it very clear when they put into host that, hey, based on what our facilities look like, it's going to be really tough with start times to get 4 games in during a night here. So for the first round, we knew that the higher seed would host one set of games, and I think the 2 seed would host another set of games. So we knew we would probably go, once we got the seeds, we'd be going to Seckman. But the thing about Seckman and Oakville is they're so similar with how they play, because Coach Carroll, that's at Seckman, was Coach Traxler's assistant for several years at Oakville. He was on the staff at Oakville that we played that first year going to the Final Four. So we knew in terms of game plan and how they played, it would be pretty similar. But they had a lot of guys. They had probably 6-7 guys that were all averaging between 6 points to 11 points a game. Shot a lot of threes. And again, I think especially coming off the first Seckman game, how we handled Oakville and districts was huge for us. I think one of the biggest moments there were we go on a little stretch. I think Cole gets a bucket, and then Austin hits a huge three to kind of stretch the game out in the second half and kind of put it away for good. And so that was a really good sign for us going forward. I didn't know exactly what would happen against Seckman going forward. I didn't even know that we'd necessarily play Seckman because we watched the Seckman-Melville game. Yeah. I literally had 3/4 of our basketball team over my shoulder as I'm watching the game on my Chromebook coming back from Seckman. But I didn't know what the outcome of the second Seckman game would be. I knew we were going to put a better effort forward than we did the first time.
Yeah, and then, that is where things did end. You guys drop it to Seckman to close out the season. A tough physical game, was a lot of the issue at times simply shots just weren't going in for you guys in that ball game? Because it was kind of that way against Oakville. You guys were able to kind of generate more offense, obviously. But
yeah, and, obviously Cole struggled offensively that game, and that hurt. Shots didn't fall. And again, I think it would. The funny thing about that is I think it would have been easy for our kids to kind of give in a little bit because they had beaten us once. Here we go again. We're not hitting shots, yada, yada, yada. And we never did. And the funniest thing that got us going and kind of made that comeback in the fourth quarter is during a timeout, we said, I just think we need, Coach and I were talking, I think we need to go with 5 guards. So we put Cole, Colton, Jory, Blaine, and Will Thomas out on the floor. And then, Cole's in foul trouble throughout the entire game, which I think hurt him because, like most kids, I think he's a rhythm kid, and I think that took him out of rhythm some. So Tatum Pullman was getting some run there late. But we just kept going. And, it was first Cole would get a bucket. Then Blaine Reagan gets an and one. Jory gets a bucket. And then obviously, and I told my wife about this later, Jory, I'm still seeing the vantage point where I'm at, and I see Jory shot fake the kid on the shot, and I see the ball go through, and I told her I must have blacked out because I remember the shot going through, and the next thing I remember is I turn around and we're all at the bench, and I really, to this day, don't know how it happened, but the funny thing about that is we work on those type of situation things almost every practice. And the first year we played Webster at home, we have a last-second shot that we execute, just doesn't go in. Last year, who did we had a very similar situation against somebody last year where Farmington. It was the Farmington game at Farmington. We have a very similar situation. We execute, shot just doesn't go in. So now we execute again, and it's the first time in 3 years that the shots actually went in.
Yeah.
So now we got to regroup, and we go back with our original lineup, and shots didn't fall again early. We go back with the all guards, and at the end of the day, they hit a couple more shots than we did. They're really well coached, and never doubt our kids' effort. Our effort was really good that game.
The Wason kid just felt like the biggest mismatch in history of basketball that game.
And again, it comes back to, and it's no fault of our kids. At the end of the day, he's an undersized post player that could take you away from the basket, make life difficult on you, and that was the problem for us. And our kids battled, but at the end of the day, they hit a couple more shots than we did, and hats off to them. Coach Carroll's a really, really good coach, and he's got that program trending in the upward swing for sure.
Yeah, we had a very cool vantage point. The Jory directly kind of in between us and the bench. So when we see the shot go in, I think Caleb might have fallen out of his chair.
Yeah, I'm going to blame that's why my voice is still gone, I think, is from reacting to that.
The funniest thing is we talk about culture all the time. And the coolest moment from that moment for me is, I didn't see it at the time, but going back and watching film is he hits that shot, and Gavin Allspaw, who's a senior, really good football player, obviously going to the innards of Wisconsin to play a little football next year, but a kid that wanted to come back out as a senior because he had a great relationship with this group of seniors. And then you have him and Braden Rice, who's a junior that didn't play a lot for us on the varsity this year, but they're kind of our bench mob, so to speak, and they constantly brought good energy. And I challenged them before Oakville to continue to bring that energy, and then Seckman do the same thing. And that shot goes in, and you see the first two people really that get on the floor to congratulate and go nuts with Jory. You see Gavin. Braden Rice is so excited. He falls down on the ground. Cole's got to pick Braden up. I mean, you look at our reaction, like that's what our culture is about. You have, whether it's Coach Toma, whether it's me, whether it's Coach McDowell, all throughout every one of our players, whether they played a second, whether they didn't, they were equally invested in what was going on for the outcome of the game. And I think that's what's special about our program.
Yeah, I mean, kind of wrapping up kind of from that point, What were your overall just general thoughts on the season where you guys started out, what's your expectations early, and then where those kind of expectations changed and where they kind of land at as the season finished?
Any year, and I think this is cliche, but I think our staff from Coach Tillman and myself all the way down truly believe this. Any year we don't end in Columbia or Springfield is not a full success. We want that to be the standard. But I thought for what we had coming back, for everybody's expectations, what this year was supposed to be, I thought we proved a lot of people wrong. I think that we showed that our culture has kind of got this to where this is what the expectation is every single year. We're supposed to win however many games, 20-plus games, whatever, compete in districts, go make a run at state. And I thought that we showed no matter how much we bring back, no matter how much we lose, that's what the Jackson standard is. So I was very proud of how many different people stepped up at different points. If we had time, I could probably go through and think of all the different plays that Cole made to win games. Colton Toma, how many defensive stops, how many different plays he made to win games. Lee Ivey, Braden Thompson, Austin Criddle, Jory Toma, Blaine Reagan, John Ernst. I mean, kids like Walker Matthews, who kind of fell out of the rotation a little bit at the end of the year, but in that second Cape game, he's playing big minutes because, Colton's sick. He comes in, gives us great minutes, hit free throws late. Ty Forrest hit shots at different points throughout the year that were big for us. Just all the way down the line, and I think that shows that no matter who puts that uniform on, there's a certain expectation of what Jackson basketball is supposed to be, and I think these kids met those expectations this year.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And you mentioned it. You guys, no matter what you lose, you have the culture in position there to stay where you're at, keep rebuilding, reloading, and you're going to be put to the test again going into next year. Looking at these the guys you're losing. I mean, you're losing your starting point guard, Colton Toma, who, talk about him specifically. I felt like his improvement was exponential. Like he backed up he backed up Braden the year before. He played here and there. He played in played in meaningful games, but he really went from somebody that's like, all right, we need you to give us a minute here, 2 minutes here, to like, we trust you to handle the ball for 30 minutes.
And it's funny because I think people lose sight sometimes of the human nature aspect of this. I have so much respect for Colton as a person because of it's a big deal in Jackson. It's a big deal anywhere when your dad is the head coach. And if anybody thinks that Corey gave preferential treatment to any of his kids, they are sadly mistaken. Colton worked for everything he got for 3 years. And the pressure that he must have felt being, I'm Braden's younger brother. I'm Corey's son. I'm this, that, and the other thing.
All my cousins are great at basketball.
I mean, you look at, Kyle was a great player here. Corey obviously was a great player here. His grandpa is one of the best coaches in the state of Missouri that they've had, and I'll go to that with my grave. But the amount of those things that he had to be thinking as a kid, for him to go through that and how he handles himself, he's a great teammate. I'm so proud of the success that he had this year because, again, of how he handled himself and how he had to work for all of it. So that was huge. Obviously, losing Cole, you lose a lot of, we'll call it beef on the inside with.
And that's interesting too, is because you're losing your three big men, but those are also, you talked about earlier, 3 guys that played sparingly to none at all in Ivy, Criddle, and Thompson. Those guys made massive jumps to be consistent, and they all have a little bit different roles. They all play similar position, but and you're going to be losing 3 of those guys. Obviously.
They all brought different things. Thompson led our team in charges, and we knew what we were going to get. He's the most vocal kid. I mean, those that know me know I do not struggle to talk, and I struggle to find somebody that talks as much as me. I think Brian and Amy will attest to this, that Braden's probably never shut up a moment in his life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But he was a great leader for us from that standpoint. And then obviously Lee's skill set offensively, whether it was taking people away and being able to shoot it, putting you on the block. Austin could shoot it, move the basketball really well. He was a really smart defender. So losing those guys will hurt a lot. At the end of the day, we'll look a lot different next year. I feel like, we talked about, Corey and I have talked a lot about this, that Jackson seems like they've always had really good bigs, really good post players. We're not going to have a lot of – I don't know that we really have a true post player in the program next year. Everybody looks at John, and he's 6'7", he's a post player. that's like everybody saw John and they see his last name and like, oh, he's got to be, if he's tall, he's got to be exactly like, he doesn't play anything like Clayton.
No.
And so I think next year our style could change a little bit of how I feel like we could look a little bit more like Seckman did offensively, of being able to open some things up based on what our personnel is. So I'm really excited about those kids, whether it's Jory, Tatum, Blaine, John, some of the kids that were on JV for us this year, our group of seniors, Will Thomas, who was another kid. That Will was a lunch pail kid, averaged about 2 points a game, but guarded, moved the basketball, had some skills offensively. So that senior group, Will, Braden Rice, Walker Matthews, Ty Forrest, we've talked about it with them in length that, it's your guys' turn to lead now. And excited to see what that group can become. Because, again, I think to a certain degree people might write us off a little bit, but you lost Cole, you lost all these seniors. I love being the underdog, and I love proving people wrong, and I know Coach Toma does as well, so I'm really excited about what this group can bring.
Yeah, and, you mentioned him a few times. Cole is graduating, and we saw, we're recording this on whatever the day is, the 25th.
Mm-hmm.
He just committed to Columbia College.
Correct.
So awesome for him.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be back-to-back All-State in Class 6. What is kind of his, legacy here at Jackson? Obviously, you've been here 3 years, the whole time with him. It's like, where do you see him in what all time at Jackson, statistically or whatever, historically, however you feel?
I think Cole's a great testament to when you continue to work and you continue to get in the gym. I think as a sophomore when he came in, I think there was a lot of talent there, but he was behind a lot of good guards that were obviously very talented. Then I think, his junior year in a lot of strange ways was probably helped in some of the maturing process because Blaine suffered the injury that he did. I don't know that Cole takes as much of a drastic jump from sophomore to junior if Blaine's there right away.
Right.
So Cole had to learn on the fly about being the guy and being the leader. But as far as his legacy, I think he goes down as probably one of the most, if not the most gifted offensive kids that Jackson has had in at least the foreseeable past. And I think that's saying a lot, and that's from all the hours that kid puts in the gym, and he should be very proud of that. And I know he'll go on to Columbia and do really good things for them. And, that's in the 3 years we've been here, he'll be the fourth kid that will be playing college basketball. Cade Winborn at Webster, Blaine Harris at Missouri State West Plains, Judd Toma at Mission University, and now Cole at Columbia. So,
yeah, and a great competitor. It felt like he talked about, going up against Scotty Atkinson. He balled out. Anytime he played another really good individual talent, even Sykeston game where we did get beat pretty good, he put up like 29, 30 in that game. It always felt like the big moments or the big matchups, he definitely had another level he would go to.
I think Cole is the antithesis of a gamer. And I know anytime I talk to a college coach, that's the one thing I always told him. He's never going back down from a challenge or a moment, no matter how big it is. So, definitely some exciting moments the last 2 years, and he will definitely be missed.
Yeah, and then you mentioned him already a few times. You have a lot of good building blocks. You had guys that played well. Jory Toma took that next step, it felt like, into being a leader offensively for you guys. And, you have him, Blaine Reagan. Those two might be underrated as some best perimeter defenders in the area. They're fantastic. And then obviously John Ernst, who's a guy who feels like his ceiling is, we have no idea what it is yet.
Correct.
6'7".
Yep.
I guess he's 15 probably now.
He is.
He could be taller by next year and by next month. He can handle it. He's sometimes, I don't know if you wanted him to or not, he can get the rebound and take it coast to coast, play make, hit open jumpers. He has a lot of potential there on those younger guys, and especially on John, like I mentioned.
Yeah, and the great thing about John is he is so multifaceted. I'll tell you right now, there'll be times where he will be kind of a point forward next year and facilitate to other kids, but he can step away and hit jump shots. He can get to the rim. He guards. That was the thing I was probably most surprised or impressed about, because I had seen him play a handful of junior high games, but his ability to guard away from the basket is pretty darn good for a kid that's the size he is. Yeah. But you have Jory and all those different kids, and that's been the fun part for me being the JV coach, is I get to see these kids continue to progress. And, you know, we were 17-4 last year on the JV, 13-6 this year. So we've continued to build that level of success at multiple levels. So as they move up, the expectation stays the same.
Well, Coach, you have anything else you want to talk about before we go here?
Just truly from the bottom of my heart, Caleb and Cody, I really appreciate your guys' coverage. What you guys do for Jackson basketball is huge. And getting the kids the attention they deserve does not go lost on me. And I just appreciate you guys having me. And Jackson Indian fans, it's going to be another exciting season.
Yeah, well, thank you for your time here, Coach, and shout out to the young ones having to get to hang out with us here a little bit too this evening.
I'll say this: they love it, and that's honestly like that. We talked about me being at Jackson. That's the coolest thing about me being here now is, you know, 2 years ago we went to the Final Four. My daughter was, I guess she would have been 4, but she remembers that. She remembers Blaine and Judd. The camera can't see her right now, but she has a T-shirt on right now that says J Toma on the back, 14, that she had her mother make her because she thinks Judd Toma can walk on water. That's the coolest part about this town and these kids, is that they don't understand the influence that they have on young kids and how much I've had a chance to bring my kids. Coach Toma lets me bring my kids to practice. They're at every home game, getting to hang out with me now. When they finally realized that Daddy goes up and does radio after games, they wanted to come up a couple times and be on the radio with me. So it's just it's a lot of fun, and I'm glad that my kids are able to see this. And I don't know if they'll remember it in 20 years, but I know I will. Even though the Final Four thing still is hilarious to me, because I told my kids, "Hey, if we win this game, we get to go to Springfield, and you guys will stay in a hotel with Mom." So we beat Eureka to go to the Final Four, and my daughter comes running to me and goes, "Daddy, we get to go stay in a hotel."
Priorities.
Yes. Hey, so priorities. But again, it's awesome having my kids and my wife, who teaches at the high school also. She's a math teacher. So thank God that she's incredibly intelligent. So my kids have an opportunity, hopefully, to do well in that going forward. But like I said, guys, I appreciate everything you guys do, and very, very proud and honored to be a part of Jackson basketball.
Thank you, as always, Coach. Getting to talk to you after games, always a good time, and getting to have you here, and hopefully we'll get to have you on some bit more in the future.
Anytime you want me, you guys have me.
All right. Well, for myself and Cody and Coach Brownsberger, we appreciate all you guys watching, listening, all those good things. We'll be back with hopefully a voice that sounds more normal in the next episode. So thank you all. Have a good one, and we'll see you in the next one.